A young man vanishes without a trace. No body, no murder weapon, no crime scene. Yet Jamaica's biggest dancehall star gets sentenced to life in prison. But why did prosecutors convict someone of murder when they couldn't even prove anyone was dead? And why did it take a decade for the truth about what happened in that courtroom to finally come to light? This is the Vybz Kartel case. So, who exactly is Vybz Kartel? Born Adidja Azim Palmer, he became one of the most influential figures in modern dancehall music. Rising in the early 2000s, Kartel didn't just make music. He shaped Jamaican street culture, fashion, and slang. He popularized the Gaza movement. He collaborated with international artists. And even from behind bars, his music continued to drop. His influence continued to spread. To understand the magnitude of his murder case, you need to understand who Kartel was at the height of his career. This wasn't just another musician facing criminal charges. This was a cultural phenomenon, a voice that resonated across the Caribbean and beyond. Kartel's lyrical style was explicit, unapologetic, and revolutionary. He pushed boundaries that other artists wouldn't touch. His songs dominated dance halls. He was a producer, a songwriter, a brand unto himself. The Gaza movement he created became more than just a fan base. It was an identity. Young people across Jamaica aligned themselves with Gaza, adopted its slang, wore its colors, lived its lifestyle. Kartel wasn't just making music, he was shaping a generation's worldview. But with that influence came scrutiny. Critics accused him of glorifying violence, of promoting gun culture, of using his platform irresponsibly. His lyrics were dissected. His lifestyle was questioned. His associations were examined. The dancehall world has always existed in a complex relationship with Jamaica's street culture. The music emerged from the poorest communities, giving voice to experiences of violence, poverty, and survival. But where's the line between artistic expression and criminal advocacy? That question would hover over Kartel's entire legal saga. In 2011, Kartel was at his absolute peak. Chart-topping hits, international recognition, a devoted following that treated him like royalty. And then, in August of that year, something happened that would change everything. So, what happened in August 2011 that would destroy Kartel's freedom? The story begins with 2 unlicensed firearms and a young man named Clive Williams. Friends called him Lizard. He was part of Kartel's wider circle, connected to his entourage in ways that would prove fatal. According to prosecutors, Williams and another man, Lamar Chow, had been entrusted with guarding 2 illegal guns allegedly belonging to Kartel. In Jamaica's volatile dancehall scene, firearms represented power, protection, and prestige. Losing them was more than careless. It was a betrayal. Then those guns went missing. What happened next depends on who you ask, but everyone agrees on this. In August 2011, Clive Lizard Williams disappeared. He was never seen again. His body was never found. His family never got closure. The prosecution painted a chilling picture. They claimed Williams and Chow were summoned to a property in Havendale, St. Andrew, connected to Kartel. And the purpose? A confrontation about those missing weapons. According to their theory, things turned violent, deadly. The prosecution's narrative was that this wasn't a random act of violence. This was a calculated execution, carried out by multiple people, with the intent to send a message about what happens when you lose Vybz Kartel's guns. But here's what made this case extraordinary from the start. There was no body, no physical remains, no crime scene that could definitively prove a murder occurred, no forensic evidence of death, no witnesses willing to come forward initially. This would become what's known as a no-body prosecution, resting entirely on witness testimony and digital evidence. But how do you prove murder without a body? Think about the challenge prosecutors faced. In most murder cases, you start with a body. The physical evidence tells a story: cause of death, time of death, location, DNA evidence, forensic pathology. In this case, they had none of that. Just a missing person, suspicious circumstances, and the monumental task of convincing a jury that someone was dead when they couldn't produce remains. No-body prosecutions are rare worldwide and extremely difficult to win. The burden of proof remains the same, beyond reasonable doubt. But without physical evidence, How do you reach that threshold? This was about building a circumstantial case so overwhelming that the jury concludes death is the only reasonable explanation. Every piece of evidence must interconnect. Every witness must be credible. Every alternative explanation must be eliminated. Prosecutors would need to prove not just that Williams disappeared, but that he was murdered, that Kartel and his co-accused were responsible, and that there was no reasonable possibility he was still alive somewhere. It was an enormous challenge. Kartel's legal troubles didn't start with the Lizard Williams case. In September 2011, just weeks after Williams disappeared, Kartel was arrested on cannabis possession charges, a relatively minor offense in many jurisdictions. But in Jamaica, it was enough to put him in custody. Then came something bigger. He was charged, along with others, in connection with the murder of businessman Barrington Bossy Burton. This was a separate incident, unrelated to the Williams case, but it fed into a growing narrative. Was Jamaica's biggest dancehall star involved in violent disputes? Were these isolated incidents or part of a pattern? Was there a criminal enterprise operating behind the music? The Burton case had its own complexities. Barrington Burton was a businessman, not someone from the dancehall world. His murder suggested that if the allegations were true, violence connected to Kartel crossed social boundaries. The prosecution in the Burton case worked to establish motive, means, and opportunity. They presented witnesses. They offered evidence. They built what they believed was a compelling case. In July 2013, a Jamaican jury answered that question: not guilty. Kartel was acquitted of Burton's murder. Acquittals in murder cases are significant. They mean the prosecution failed to meet its burden of proof. The jury wasn't convinced beyond reasonable doubt. But in the court of public opinion, the impact was more ambiguous. Some saw the acquittal as vindication, proof that Kartel was being unfairly targeted, that the state was desperate to pin crimes on a controversial celebrity, regardless of actual evidence. Others saw it differently. They argued that acquittal doesn't mean innocence, just that the prosecution couldn't prove guilt. They pointed to the fact that Kartel remained in custody on the Williams charge as evidence that something more serious was coming. But he couldn't walk free, not yet. He was still facing the more serious charge, the one that would define his life, the alleged murder of Clive "Lizard" Williams. August 2011 marked the beginning of Kartel's downfall. Williams disappeared after allegedly being summoned over missing guns, and though Kartel was later acquitted in the Burton murder case, the Williams charge would lead to his conviction and decade-long imprisonment. Let me walk you through what prosecutors claimed happened on that August day in 2011. According to their narrative, Williams and Chow arrived at the Havendale premises. They were confronted about the missing firearms by Kartel and several associates. The mood, prosecutors said, was hostile from the start. These weren't guns that could simply be replaced. In Jamaica's underground economy, firearms carry serious value, and losing them suggested either incompetence or theft. Then the situation escalated into violence. The Crown's theory was brutal. Williams was allegedly beaten to death, while Chow somehow managed to escape. But the evidence they presented was unlike anything Jamaica had seen in a murder trial. The case file was massive. Hundreds of pages of phone records, thousands of text messages, witness statements that took months to compile, digital forensic reports that required expert testimony to interpret. And at the center of it all was technology. Mobile phones had become ubiquitous in Jamaica by 2011. Even in poorer communities, everyone had one. Everyone texted. Everyone left a digital trail. Remember those missing guns? That wasn't even the most compelling evidence. What really drove this case was digital forensics, text messages, call records, data extracted from mobile phones that prosecutors said told the story of a murder from beginning to end. But what did those text messages reveal? The prosecution's digital evidence strategy was groundbreaking for Jamaica. They brought in telecommunications experts. They built a technological case that relied on jurors understanding complex phone records. Among the evidence described in court were messages from Clive Williams himself in the hours before he disappeared. According to testimony, Williams allegedly told his girlfriend that Kartel was going to kill him. He reportedly asked her to call the police. These messages, if authentic, were devastating. They showed consciousness of danger. They demonstrated that Williams believed his life was an immediate threat. They pointed directly at Kartel as the source of that threat. But there was more. Call records allegedly showed a flurry of communication between Kartel and his co-accused around the time Williams disappeared. Patterns that prosecutors argued showed coordination, planning, and execution of a murder. Then there were the messages after Williams vanished. According to the prosecution, phones connected to Kartel and his associates contained discussions about what happened, references to the assault, mentions of disposing of a body, conversations that, if genuine, amounted to confessions. The defense would later challenge every aspect of this digital evidence, but at trial, it formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. Then there were the call records, patterns of communication that investigators said showed coordination among Kartel and the co-accused. Messages they claimed discussed the assault and even the disposal of Williams's body. But the physical evidence told its own story too. Days after Williams disappeared, the Havendale house connected to the alleged attack was burned down. Prosecutors argued this was a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. The defense would later call this circumstantial. The burning of the house raised obvious questions. If nothing criminal happened there, why destroy it? If Williams simply left and disappeared for his own reasons, what was there to hide? Arson can be evidence of consciousness of guilt. Criminals destroy crime scenes to eliminate DNA, fingerprints, blood evidence, but it can also point to alternative explanations. Was someone covering up a murder, or was the fire unrelated? Did the timing prove causation or just coincidence? These questions would be debated extensively at trial, but in the court of public opinion, the burned house became a symbol. To supporters, it showed a rush to judgment. To critics, it confirmed a cover-up. So, who was the key witness who escaped that night? In November 2013, the trial began. It would run for 64 to 65 days, making it one of the longest criminal trials in Jamaican history. The defendant wasn't just any accused murderer. This was Vybz Kartel, one of the Caribbean's most famous cultural figures. The courthouse atmosphere was electric. Security was tight. Media from across the world descended on Kingston. Supporters rallied outside, chanting Kartel's name. Critics demanded justice for Clive Williams. Alongside Kartel, 4 others were charged. Fellow entertainer Sean Storm Campbell, Kahira Jones, Andre St. John, and Shane Williams. All were alleged to have participated in what happened at Havendale. Sean Storm was another dancehall artist, signed to Kartel's label. His inclusion suggested this wasn't just about Kartel himself, but about an organization, a group operating together. The media coverage was intense. Local outlets, international press, music journalists, legal analysts. Everyone was watching as Jamaica's justice system took on one of its biggest celebrity cases. The trial became a referendum on more than just guilt or innocence. Every day of testimony was analyzed. Every witness was scrutinized. Every piece of evidence was debated in courtrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across Jamaica and the diaspora. The courtroom became a battleground. On one side, prosecutors with their digital evidence and witness testimony. On the other, defense attorneys argued that the case was built on questionable phone data and unreliable witnesses. And in the middle, a jury that would deliberate for hours before reaching their verdict. The prosecution team was led by senior attorneys with experience in major cases. They understood the challenge of a no-body prosecution. They knew every element had to be proven meticulously. The defense team was equally formidable, high-powered lawyers who specialized in criminal defense, who understood that in Jamaica's justice system, reasonable doubt was their weapon. The prosecution built their case without a body, relying heavily on digital evidence. Text messages showing Williams feared for his life, call records suggesting coordination among the accused, and the burning of the alleged crime scene, all pointing to a carefully orchestrated murder and cover-up. The digital evidence became the centerpiece of everything. Police witnesses and telecommunications officials took the stand, describing how they extracted data from mobile devices. The phones allegedly contained a digital trail of conspiracy and violence. These witnesses spent days explaining technical processes, how phones store data, how deleted messages can sometimes be recovered, how call records are maintained by service providers, how location data can place devices at specific locations. For many jurors, this was the first time they had encountered digital forensics in detail. The technology was relatively new, the methods were complex, the testimony required concentration and trust in expert witnesses. But even during the trial, questions emerged. Defense lawyers challenged the methods used to obtain this phone data. Were proper forensic procedures followed? Was the chain of custody secure? Could the data be trusted? Chain of custody refers to the documented process of who handled evidence, when, and how. In digital forensics, it's crucial. If a phone or hard drive passes through multiple hands without proper documentation, how do you prove the data wasn't altered? The defense raised concerns about missing documentation, about storage devices that couldn't be accounted for, about forensic protocols that may not have been followed. These weren't just technical quibbles. They were questions about the integrity of the entire prosecution, and years later, these same questions would prove crucial. So, what happened to the digital storage media? The prosecution called multiple witnesses over the 65-day trial. Police officers who investigated the disappearance, telecommunications experts who extracted the phone data, associates of Kartel who had information about what happened. Each witness added a piece to the prosecution's puzzle. Some described the relationship between Kartel and Williams. Others testified about the missing guns. Several placed various defendants at the Havendale property around the critical time. But one witness would prove more important than all the others combined. Lamar Chow was the survivor who became the prosecution's key witness. He testified that both he and Williams were assaulted at the house, that he saw Williams lying motionless on the ground, and that he managed to escape, providing the only eyewitness account of the alleged murder. Lamar Chow's testimony was devastating for the defense. As the man who accompanied Clive Williams to Havendale and lived to tell about it, his words carried immense weight. Chow described arriving at the property with Williams, the initial confrontation about the missing guns, the escalating anger, the moment violence erupted. He testified about being assaulted alongside Williams. He told the court he saw Williams on the ground, motionless, bleeding. Then he described his escape, fleeing from what he claimed was a murder scene. For a case with no body, no physical remains, no forensic evidence of death, Chow's testimony was everything. Without him, there was no murder. There was just a missing person and suspicious circumstances. But Chow's testimony raised as many questions as it answered. How did he escape when Williams couldn't? Why did he wait to come forward? What was his relationship with the defendants before and after the incident? The defense attacked his credibility hard. They pointed out inconsistencies in his story, details that changed between his initial statement and his trial testimony, time frames that didn't quite add up, descriptions that seemed rehearsed. They suggested he had strong incentives to cooperate with prosecutors. Maybe he was cutting a deal. Maybe he was avoiding his own prosecution. Maybe he was lying to save himself. They noted that Chow had his own alleged involvement with the missing guns. If he was equally responsible for losing them, wasn't he equally liable for whatever consequences followed? But the jury heard him, and when combined with those text messages, those call records, that burned house, his testimony formed a narrative that 12 Jamaicans found convincing. Chow spent days on the witness stand. Direct examination by prosecutors established his story. Cross-examination by defense attorneys tried to destroy it. Redirect examination attempted to rehabilitate any damage. The experience was grueling. Every word was scrutinized. Every gesture was analyzed. Every inconsistency was highlighted. This was a man whose testimony could send multiple people to prison for life. The pressure was extraordinary. So, what was the verdict, and what sentence did Kartel face? As the trial wound toward its conclusion, both sides presented closing arguments. The prosecution summarized their case: disappearance, digital evidence, witness testimony, consciousness of guilt, all pointing toward murder. The defense countered no body, questionable phone data, unreliable witness, circumstantial evidence. They argued that disappearance doesn't prove death, that the burden of proof hadn't been met. Then came jury instructions. The judge explained the law of murder, the requirement of proof beyond reasonable doubt, how to evaluate witness credibility, how to consider circumstantial evidence. The jury retired to deliberate. Hours passed, then more hours. The waiting was excruciating. March 13th, 2014. After weeks of evidence, arguments, and deliberation, the jury returned. The verdicts came back 10-1. In Jamaica's legal system, a jury verdict doesn't have to be unanimous. A 10-1 or 11-1 majority is sufficient for conviction. But it also means at least one juror disagreed with the others. Kartel, Campbell, Jones, and St. John were all convicted of murdering Clive Lizard Williams. Shane Williams, the fifth defendant, was acquitted. The split on Shane Williams was significant. It showed the jury carefully considered each defendant's individual involvement. They didn't just conclude there was a murder and convict everyone associated with it. But for the four who were convicted, the message was clear. The jury believed Clive Williams was dead. They believed he died at the Havendale property. And they believed Kartel and his co-accused were responsible. The conviction was significant beyond just one celebrity's fate. This case was seen as a test. Could Jamaica's legal system prosecute complex, gang-related cases? Could it hold powerful cultural figures accountable? The guilty verdict seemed to answer yes. Jamaica had successfully prosecuted its biggest dancehall star, a celebrity with millions of fans, significant resources, and the ability to shape public opinion. The verdict suggested that fame didn't provide immunity. Defense lawyers discovered that some digital storage media had gone missing, and the chain of custody for phone data was questionable, as these issues would later become central to appeal arguments that the evidence was obtained in breach of forensic guidelines and couldn't be trusted. The missing storage media issue would haunt this case for years. During the trial, defense attorneys discovered that certain hard drives and storage devices used in the forensic examination of phones couldn't be accounted for. This wasn't a minor administrative oversight. In digital forensics, the original storage media is crucial. It allows independent experts to verify the prosecution's findings. It ensures data wasn't altered or corrupted. Without access to the original media, the defense couldn't properly challenge the digital evidence. They had to accept the prosecution's representations about what the phones contained without the ability to independently verify. This violated basic principles of forensic science and criminal defense rights. A defendant must be able to test the evidence against them. If the evidence is digital, that means access to the original data storage. Questions emerged. Where did the storage devices go? Were they lost accidentally or intentionally? Had the data been preserved elsewhere? Could anyone guarantee that what the prosecution presented was authentic and unaltered? These issues would become central to the appeal that followed. But at trial, the jury didn't fully grasp their significance. The technical complexity may have obscured the fundamental fairness problem. On April 3, 2014, the judge handed down the sentence: life imprisonment. Kartel would have to serve a minimum of 35 years before being eligible for parole. For a man in his late 30s, this was effectively a death sentence behind bars. He would be in his 70s before even being considered for release. His children would be adults. His musical era would be history. The dancehall king who had dominated Jamaican music would grow old in prison, his career over, his freedom gone. His co-accused received similar life sentences with varying parole eligibility. Sean Storm got 25 years before parole eligibility. Kahira Jones got 25 years. Andre St. John got the same as Kartel, 35 years. The sentences reflected the seriousness of murder under Jamaican law, but they also reflected the judge's assessment of each defendant's role. Kartel, as the alleged ringleader, received the harshest minimum term. One of dancehall's most influential voices had been silenced, removed from public life for what everyone expected would be decades. The reaction was explosive. Supporters protested outside the courthouse, but others saw the verdict differently. They argued that justice had been served, that a murderer had been held accountable, that nobody, regardless of fame, was above the law. The case divided Jamaica along multiple fault lines: class, geography, generational attitudes toward dancehall, views on the justice system itself. But this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. On March 13, 2014, the jury returned guilty verdicts against Kartel and 3 co-accused in a 10-to-1 majority decision, with Kartel sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years before parole eligibility, effectively ending his career and freedom for decades. But what grounds did Kartel have for appeal? Immediately, the defense team began planning their appeal. In Jamaica's legal system, convicted defendants have the right to challenge their convictions in the Court of Appeal. The grounds for appeal were extensive: the handling of digital evidence, questions about jury management, allegedly inadequate directions from the trial judge, the issue of the missing storage media, concerns about witness credibility. Each ground required detailed legal argument. Transcripts had to be reviewed, precedents had to be cited, expert opinions had to be obtained. Appeals aren't retrials. The Court of Appeal doesn't hear witnesses again or reconsider evidence from scratch. Instead, they review the trial record to determine if legal errors occurred that rendered the verdict unsafe. So, did the trial judge make mistakes in law? Were the jury instructions proper? Was evidence admitted that should have been excluded, or excluded that should have been admitted? Did any irregularity compromise the fairness of the proceedings? The appeal process took years. Briefs had to be prepared. Oral arguments had to be scheduled. The 3-judge appellate panel had to consider complex legal issues. Meanwhile, Kartel remained in prison. His music continued to be released, recorded during visits or through collaborations with outside producers. His cultural influence didn't disappear, but he couldn't perform, couldn't tour, couldn't fully participate in the world he'd shaped. In 2020, 6 years after the conviction, the Jamaican Court of Appeal ruled. Appeal dismissed. The murder conviction was upheld, though Kartel's minimum sentence was reduced from 35 years to 32.5 years. A small victory, but the conviction stood. The Court of Appeal found that despite concerns about some aspects of the trial, the verdicts were safe. The evidence was sufficient. The legal processes were adequate. The convictions should stand. For supporters who believed in his innocence, this was devastating. 6 years of hope that the appeal would free him, crushed. 6 years of legal work seemingly for nothing. For critics who saw him as guilty, it was vindication. Jamaica's Court of Appeal, examining the trial carefully, concluded the jury got it right. But here is the twist. There was still one more court to appeal to. One final opportunity. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in the United Kingdom serves as Jamaica's highest appellate court. It was Kartel's last chance. The Privy Council is a remnant of Jamaica's colonial past. As a former British colony, Jamaica retained the Privy Council as its final court of appeal even after independence. Many Jamaicans debate whether this should continue, but it remains the law. Getting to the Privy Council requires leave to appeal. Not every case is accepted. The legal issues must be significant enough to warrant the Council's attention. Kartel's team argued that the issues in his case met that threshold. Constitutional questions about fair trial rights, novel issues about digital evidence, serious concerns about jury misconduct. The Privy Council agreed to hear the case. But what new evidence or arguments would emerge at the Privy Council? In February 2024, 10 years after the original conviction, the Privy Council heard arguments. The setting was London, thousands of miles from where the alleged crime occurred, in the ornate chambers of the UK's highest legal authority. The defense renewed all their challenges: digital evidence, jury pressure, trial judge conduct. But they emphasized something else, something that had been lurking in the background of this case since 2014: juror misconduct. During the original trial, allegations emerged that one juror, sometimes called Juror X, had tried to bribe fellow jurors. Allegedly, this juror offered money to sway the verdict in a particular direction. The allegations weren't made up after the fact. They came out during deliberations, while the trial was still ongoing. Other jurors reported the attempted bribery to court officials. And despite this accusation coming out while the trial was still ongoing, that juror remained on the panel. Think about that for a moment. A juror accused of bribery, still deliberating, still voting on guilt or innocence, still participating in the verdict that would send multiple people to prison for life. The trial judge had been informed of the allegation. Court officials knew. The prosecution knew. The defense knew. But rather than removing the juror or declaring a mistrial, the judge gave a general reminder about juror duties and allowed deliberations to continue. Why wasn't the juror removed? Why wasn't a mistrial declared? What was the reasoning behind allowing someone accused of attempting to corrupt the verdict to remain on the panel? These questions would become central to the Privy Council's analysis. Because if the trial was fundamentally unfair due to juror misconduct, nothing else mattered. Not the strength of the evidence, not the other legal issues. A verdict from a corrupted jury cannot stand. The prosecution argued that the judge had handled the situation appropriately, that a general reminder was sufficient, that there was no evidence the bribery attempt succeeded, that the 10-to-1 verdict showed the jury wasn't unanimous anyway, suggesting the accused juror may have been the dissenter. But the defense countered, bribery attempts undermined confidence in the entire verdict. You can't know whether the attempt succeeded. You can't know how it affected other jurors' thinking. The mere presence of someone willing to corrupt the process taints everything. The Privy Council listened to days of argument. They questioned both sides closely. They explored the legal precedents. They considered the constitutional implications. Kartel's defense team appealed on multiple grounds. They challenged the digital evidence handling and missing storage media, raised concerns about jury management, questioned the trial judge's directions to the jury, and argued the conviction was fundamentally unsafe due to procedural failures throughout the trial. The Privy Council's decision would take weeks. Meanwhile, speculation ran rampant. Would they uphold the conviction, order a retrial, quash the verdicts entirely? Legal experts debated the possible outcomes. Some predicted the council would send the case back for retrial, finding errors but not declaring innocence. Others thought the convictions would stand with perhaps some technical corrections. Few predicted what actually happened. March 2024. The Privy Council delivered its decision. The convictions were quashed, overturned, declared unsafe. The judgment was unanimous and devastating for the original prosecution. All 5 law lords agreed. The trial had been fundamentally unfair. The Privy Council ruled that allowing the allegedly bribing juror to remain on the panel undermined the entire fairness of the trial. The judge's limited response hadn't repaired the damage. The defendant's right to a fair hearing had been breached. Constitutional protections had been violated. Common law principles of natural justice had been ignored. The verdict, regardless of the evidence, could not safely stand. The judgment was detailed and comprehensive. It reviewed the trial transcript. It examined exactly what the judge knew and when. It considered whether the remedial steps taken were sufficient. The conclusion was clear. When a juror is credibly accused of attempting to bribe others during deliberations, decisive action is required. The juror must be removed or the entire jury must be discharged. A general warning is insufficient. The Privy Council emphasized that this wasn't about whether the bribery succeeded. It was about maintaining public confidence in the justice system, about ensuring that verdicts come from untainted deliberations. This wasn't a declaration of innocence. The Privy Council didn't say Kartel didn't do it. They didn't say Williams wasn't murdered. They said the trial was so compromised that the guilty verdict couldn't safely stand. That distinction is crucial. An overturned conviction based on procedural unfairness is different from an acquittal based on insufficient evidence. One says the process was flawed. The other says the defendant didn't do it. So, was Kartel innocent? The Privy Council didn't answer that question. They couldn't. Their job was to determine whether the trial was fair, not whether the defendant was guilty. The Privy Council found that during the original trial, a juror allegedly attempted to bribe other jurors, and despite this allegation emerging during deliberations, the juror remained on the panel with only a general warning from the judge, and this became the fatal flaw that destroyed the conviction's validity and violated constitutional fair trial rights. So, could there be a retrial? The case was sent back to Jamaica's Court of Appeal with one crucial question. Should there be a new trial? This wasn't a simple decision. The Privy Council had quashed the convictions, but they left it to Jamaica's domestic courts to determine whether the interests of justice required a retrial. Consider what a retrial would mean. The alleged crime happened in 2011. It was now 2024. 13 years had passed. 13 years of memories fading, witnesses disappearing, evidence degrading. Lamar Chow, the key witness, would need to testify again. Would his testimony be consistent with what he said in 2014? Would he even be willing to testify again, knowing the scrutiny and pressure he'd face? What about other witnesses? Some might have died, others might have moved away, lost contact, become unavailable. Witness availability is always a concern in retrials, but after 13 years, it becomes critical. Then there was the digital evidence. The phones from 2011 would now be obsolete technology. And those missing storage devices, still missing. The chain of custody problems, still unresolved. And there was the financial consideration. The original trial lasted 65 days. It consumed enormous public resources: court time, prosecutor salaries, police investigation costs, expert witness fees. A retrial would cost millions of Jamaican dollars. In a country with limited resources and pressing social needs, was that the best use of public funds? Especially when the outcome was uncertain? But there was something else, something that weighed heavily on the decision. Reports had emerged about Kartel's health. Years in prison had taken their toll on his physical condition. Jamaica's prison system is notoriously harsh: overcrowding, poor medical care, inadequate nutrition. These conditions affect all inmates, celebrity or not. Kartel had developed serious medical issues during his incarceration. His lawyers argued that his health was deteriorating rapidly. That further imprisonment, especially during another lengthy trial, could be life-threatening, that he needed medical care beyond what the prison system could provide. The prosecution had to weigh this against the interests of justice. If Kartel's health was truly failing, would he even survive another trial? And if not, what was the point of ordering one? Now, what about the victim's family? What did they want? While lawyers debated procedural issues, one perspective risked being forgotten. The family of Clive "Lizard" Williams. They had lost their son, brother, and family member in 2011. His body was never found. They never got to bury him properly. They never got closure about what exactly happened that August day. For 13 years, they'd lived with that uncertainty. The trial in 2014 had given them some answers, a verdict that validated their belief that Clive was murdered. Now that verdict was gone. The media coverage of this case had focused overwhelmingly on Kartel, his celebrity, his music, his legal team, his conditions in prison. Clive Williams sometimes seemed like a footnote, a name in a headline rather than a person whose life mattered. Did the Williams family have a voice in the retrial decision? Were they consulted? Or were they spectators in a legal drama focused on everyone except the person they'd lost? In mid-2024, Jamaican appellate judges made their decision. No retrial. The interests of justice, they concluded, did not require starting over. The murder case that had captivated Jamaica, imprisoned its biggest dancehall star, and sparked international debate was over. Finished. Closed. After years in custody, Vybz Kartel was released. The quash conviction would not be replaced by a new proceeding. Legally, he was no longer serving a sentence for the murder of Clive "Lizard" Williams. The court's reasoning considered multiple factors. The time elapsed made a fair trial unlikely. Key witnesses might be unavailable. The digital evidence issues remained unresolved. The costs would be prohibitive. And yes, Kartel's health played a role. Medical reports submitted to the court detailed his conditions. The judges concluded that the interests of justice didn't require subjecting him to another lengthy trial. But what about the Williams family? The court acknowledged their loss. They expressed sympathy for their situation. But they concluded that a retrial, under these circumstances, wouldn't serve justice for anyone. The decision was controversial. Critics argued that it meant wealthy defendants with resources for lengthy appeals could escape justice. That procedure had trumped truth. That a murderer walked free on a technicality. Supporters countered that this was exactly how the justice system should work. That fair trial rights matter more than securing convictions. That an unsafe verdict is worse than no verdict at all. So, let's address the question that brought us here. How many murders was Vybz Kartel actually linked to? Public reporting often suggests multiple cases, But the reality is more nuanced. There were two main murder allegations that went to trial. The Barrington Bossy Burton case ended in acquittal in 2013. Kartel was legally cleared. The jury said, not guilty. In the eyes of the law, he had nothing to do with Burton's death. The Clive Lizard Williams case resulted in conviction in 2014. But that conviction was overturned in 2024, and no retrial was ordered. As of today, there is no standing murder conviction against Vybz Kartel. None. Zero. He is not legally a convicted murderer. Does that mean he's innocent? The law doesn't say that either. The law says the trial was unfair, not that he didn't commit the crime. There's a crucial distinction. In the Burton case, the jury affirmatively found him not guilty. That's an acquittal based on insufficient evidence. It's as close to a declaration of innocence as the legal system provides. So, we're left with uncertainty. Legal uncertainty that reflects the complexity of trying to determine truth through adversarial proceedings. The system designed to find facts sometimes ends by finding procedural flaws instead. So, what do you think? Should there have been a retrial? Drop your thoughts below. Subscribe for more similar videos. Until next time.